Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, is in the province of Boumerdès, east of Algiers, to inaugurate the seawater desalination plant Kabjanat 2. The A3+ group to the Security Council pleaded in New York for humanitarian access to people in need in Afghanistan, where the security situation marked by the presence of terrorist groups remain concerning. And as the Israeli occupation pursued its attacks on the West Bank and Gaza, the Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa called on the international community to put more pressure on the Israeli occupation to put a halt to its attacks against the Palestinian people. And those were the major developments. Now the full news edition. I'm Asia Bakar. Good afternoon. The President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, is in the province of Boumerdès, east of Algiers, to inaugurate the seawater desalination plant Kabjanat 2. Its capacity production reaches 300 million litres per day. The inauguration of the Kabjanat 2 plant follows a series of other inaugurations across the country, including Foucatou in Tipaza and Kablan in Oran. The move is aimed at strengthening Algeria's water security. The magazine El Jaish has said that the new victorious Algeria is making major achievements and strategic projects constituting a significant step forward in strengthening Algeria's water security. And Jamal Salmani has the details.
The seawater desalination plants constitute a significant step forward in strengthening Algeria's water security and meeting the needs of citizens in drinking water. El Jaish added that in addition to these mega projects, Algeria's diplomacy has succeeded in strengthening Algeria's presence on the continental and international scale, allowing it to regain its prestigious position at the United Nations, notably within the UN Security Council in its capacity as a non-permanent member, and at the continental level as an eminent and effective member in the various structures and bodies of the African Union. Meanwhile, the National People's Army keeps working with modernization and professionalization at all levels on uplifting Algeria's position in various fields, notably in military cooperation with many armies of friendly countries, as Algeria is a regional power and an essential partner in the preservation and strengthening of regional and international security.
You still listen to Radio Algeria International, and Sonalgas has announced the preparation for consultative meetings to take place via video conference with officials and operators from the energy sector in Senegal, Guinea-Bissau, Gambia and Cape Verde to examine possible cooperation opportunities. Mr. Chofi has the details.
This initiative was announced during a meeting held between the CEO of Sonalgas, Mourad Adjal, and the Algerian ambassador to Senegal, Rida Nbais, at the headquarters of Sonalgas Group here in Algeria. The group's approach is aimed at strengthening economic relations with African countries, particularly in West Africa. Sonalgas Group's communications director, Fatima Zahra Merzouki, announced that upcoming video conference meetings will explore cooperation opportunities between Senegalese operators and Sonalgas. These meetings will also prepare for the chairman and CEO's working visit alongside senior executives and key industry representatives.
Il sera procédé de manière urgente à la programmation.
Consultative meetings will be scheduled shortly with energy sector officials and stakeholders in Senegal and the three neighboring countries, namely Guinea-Bissau, Gambia and Cape Verde. These meetings, which will be held very soon via video conference, aim to explore possible cooperation opportunities between Senegalese operators and Sonalgas. They will serve as a preparatory step for the working visit to be paid by the chairman and CEO of Sonalgaz, in coordination with the Algerian embassy in this country. During this visit, he will be accompanied by a delegation made up of senior Sonalgaz executives and representatives from several public and private companies that are part of the value chain forming Sonalgaz's core business.
Le corps de métier de Sonelgaz.
In the same context, Mr. Adjal reaffirmed Sonalgaz's commitment to expanding its activities in the region, emphasizing the positive results achieved by the group as part of its cooperation with the Nigerian electricity company Nigelec. For his part, the Algerian ambassador hailed Sonalgaz's performance and international achievements, particularly in Africa, highlighting the importance of supporting the group's expansion in new markets. This aligns with the vision of the highest authorities to strengthen Algeria's economic presence on the continent.
The Minister of National Solidarity, Family and Women's Issues, Ms. Soraya Moulouji, is taking part in the 69th session of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women at the headquarters of the UN in New York. Ms. Moulouji is presenting the Algerian experience in the promotion and protection of women, as well as the efforts made by the state to consolidate their socio-economic empowerment and strengthen their position and participation in all areas. The Minister will also participate in several activities organized on the sidelines of this session, in addition to bilateral meetings with ministers from friendly and brotherly countries. Ms. Moulouji will highlight the Algerian experience in women's empowerment during the ministerial roundtable on gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, and during the meeting organized by the Arab League on the suffering endured by Palestinian women and the deterioration of their conditions. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, the A3 Plus group, to the UN Security Council, including Algeria, Somalia, Sierra Leone, and Guyana, pleaded in New York for humanitarian access to people in need in Afghanistan, where the security situation marked by the presence of terrorist groups remain concerning. Jamal Salmani has more on this report.
In a speech delivered on behalf of the A3 Plus group at a Security Council meeting held on the situation in Afghanistan, Guyana's representative to the United Nations, Caroline Rodriguez, called for unhindered humanitarian access to people in need, stressing that the latest report by the UN Secretary General reveals the difficulties confronting the Afghan people on many fronts.
The humanitarian situation is particularly concerning, with 22.9 million people requiring assistance in 2025 due to high levels of food insecurity and malnutrition, recurring natural hazards and climatic shocks, internal displacements, the growing number of returnees, a fragile economy, and ongoing restrictions on the Afghan people, particularly women and girls. We are concerned that despite slight improvements in food security during the reporting period, more than 92,000 children under the age of 5 are suffering from severe acute malnutrition.
The UN reported that the Taliban's restrictions on women and girls in Afghanistan have already affected around 1.5 million female students. Ms. Rodriguez reiterated the appeal made by the A3 Plus to the Taliban to reopen all schools for girls.
We reiterate our call for the Taliban to reopen all schools and universities and to swiftly reverse all laws, policies, and practices that discriminate against women and girls and infringe their human rights and fundamental freedoms. The A3 Plus emphasizes that the full, equal, and meaningful participation and leadership of women in all spheres of life is necessary for Afghanistan's development and prosperity.
The A3 Plus group expressed concern regarding the deteriorating security situation, which may affect the whole region, reiterating its conviction that dialogue between the international community and Afghanistan is fundamental.
The security situation in Afghanistan remains of great concern, especially with the presence of terrorist groups in the country. 7 terrorist attacks claimed by ISIL-K resulted in several casualties. We call on the Taliban to scale up efforts to combat terrorism and urge countries in the region to intensify joint efforts to stabilize the security situation in Afghanistan and the wider region. The A3 Plus reiterates our belief that engagement between the international community and Afghanistan is crucial for for the country's social and economic development, as well as for sustainable peace and stability. We call upon the Taliban to comply with Afghanistan's international obligations for the well-being of the Afghan people.
Ms. Rodriguez also stressed the crucial role that the United Nations must continue to play in providing humanitarian assistance and in reviving the political process at the service of the people of Afghanistan.
And a lawyer from Afghanistan and the co-founder of the Hamdaeli campaign has briefed the Security Council about the serious international crimes that have been committed in Afghanistan for decades, calling for accountability. Speaking to reports, she warned that the crimes are committed with impunity under the Taliban today.
My name is Azad Araz Mohammed. I'm a lawyer from Afghanistan and also the co-founder of the Hamdaeli campaign. Since 2021, the Taliban have waged an unrelenting campaign to erase women and girls from public life. Through at least 126 decrees, they have stripped women and girls of their most fundamental rights. Women are suffocating inside their homes, banned from even looking outside their windows. Their voices are silenced, and their very existence is criminalized. This is a system of gender apartheid. The Taliban have dismantled every institution that once protected human rights, leaving women of Afghanistan with no accountability, no justice, and no future.
That was a lawyer from Afghanistan and co-founder of the Hamdaeli campaign. To the Middle East now, as the Israeli occupation pursued its attacks on the West Bank and Gaza, the Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa called on the international community to put more pressure on the Israeli occupation to put a halt to its attacks against the Palestinian people. He urged the European countries to force the Israeli authorities to agree to a reopening of all crossing points with the Gaza Strip to allow in aid. The Palestinian official was quoted by the news agency Wafa as saying that it is necessary to put an end to the incursions and attacks carried out by the Israeli army in the northern part of the West Bank that caused the destruction of infrastructure and displacement of Palestinians. In this connection, one Palestinian was shot dead and another one injured during an assault launched today at dawn by the Israeli soldiers on the town of Jenin. Still with Palestine, and at least 30 people were arrested during operations carried out overnight by the Israeli occupation in various governorates of their territory, including Ramallah, Beit Lahem, Nablus, and Hebron. This came as the Arab Parliament condemned the Israeli authorities' decision to stop supplying the Gaza Strip with electricity, warning against the repercussions of such escalation. The Parliament Speaker denounced the decision as a war crime and collective punishment that runs counter the international law and stressed that the measure would further worsen the humanitarian crisis which is already besetting the enclave. In this connection, UNICEF affirmed that the serious lack of water in the Gaza Strip reached critical levels as 90% of the population has no access to drinking water. In a similar move, Amnesty International stated that the Israeli authorities' decision to stop supplying Gaza's main desalination plant with electricity constituted a new evidence of genocide perpetrated against the Palestinian people. It stressed that the decision came only 1 week after the Israeli government blocked the entry of humanitarian aid and other supplies, including food and fuel, into Gaza in violation of the international humanitarian aid. You still listen to Radio Algeria International and to Sudan Now. The United Nations has warned that without urgent funding, famine could spread in Sudan in the coming months as major donors cut funding for the country. Masoud Sharfi.
The UN humanitarian coordinator in Sudan, Clementine Nakwita Salami, said the sudden funding cuts by major government donors are a catastrophic blow to humanitarian assistance in Sudan, a country in the grip of one of the deadliest humanitarian crises of our time. The UN official called on major donors to reconsider their decision to cut funding for vital humanitarian aid to Sudan, while calling on other governments, donors, foundations, charities, faith-based networks, the private sector and individuals to urgently step in to fill the gaps left by these devastating cuts. The UN said major donors have recently announced drastic cuts and suspensions in their funding, leaving humanitarian organizations struggling to reach some 21 million people in need in Sudan this year without much support. The cuts come at a time when needs in Sudan have never been greater in the Northeast African country, which is facing the world's worst food crisis. Nearly 25 million people are acutely food insecure, more than half of the population, representing the highest level of hunger in the country's history.
And the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD, will virtually hold the 43rd Emergency Summit on the situation in South Sudan on Wednesday. IGAD Executive Secretary Workney Gebeyeho called for restraint and dialogue to end rising tensions in South Sudan. The East African Bloc leader expressed deep concern over the escalation of tensions and armed clashes in South Sudan's Nasir County, stressing that the latest developments pose a risk to the hard-won achievements in implementing the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in South Sudan and threaten peace in the country. And that's it for our news bulletin. I invite you now to listen to our health magazine, compiled and presented by Mohammed Khater.
Hello and welcome to this edition of your weekly program, The Health Magazine, devoted to the holy month of Ramadan. During the holy month of Ramadan, millions of Muslims around the world focus on inner reflection and fast from dusk to dawn. If you fast during Ramadan, not only do you change your eating and sleeping patterns, but your body's biological clock also undergoes a series of changes, both physically and mentally. Dehydrated and hungry due to fasting, your body slows down your metabolism in order to use energy as efficiently as possible.